Hello everybody, my name is Jeremy and you're watching The Morgue, where we dissect the juicy innards of the MMO gaming industry. Now, seeing as this is our very first episode ever, there are a few topics that we need to cover up front before we get into the details of today's topics. First and foremost, obviously, is what the heck is this show all about? Well, if you don't already know and you're watching anyway, thanks, Mom. After that, we're going to be talking about two very important projects in the MMO gaming industry that are currently under development. Neither of these games have been released, but both are worth watching, and I will tell you why. Those two games being, of course, ArenaNet's Guild Wars 2 and BioWare's Star Wars: The Old Republic. Before we get into any of that discussion, however, I'd like to introduce you to somebody very important, me. Now, as I said, my name is Jeremy. If you meet me online, you might know me under the pseudonym of Bordicus. I am not an industry professional, but I play one on the internet. Since the inception of the MMO industry in the late 90s, I have had my fingers in almost every single title ever released. I've been an avid gamer in the MMO industry since my very first game, Sierra's The Realm, which I started playing in 1997. That's older than some of you watching this right now. During that more than a decade of experience, I've taken on every role possible within the community of the MMO industry. I have been everything from a trollish flamebot to a no-nonsense guild leader, a friendly role player, and a casual part-timer. Throughout all of these different roles that I have played, I've picked up insights into what motivates different types of MMO gamers. And as icing on that beautiful cake that is me, I also have an extremely high amount of curiosity for what actually goes on behind the iron curtain of development, to such a degree that I've actually managed to build a number of contacts that hopefully will appear on the show in the future. But enough about me. How about the show itself, right? You want to know what it is that you're watching. The purpose of The Morgue is to take a very high-level view at industry events and news coverage within the genre of MMOs. Every story that will be covered on this show will have a focus on how that story is impacting the industry in its entirety. We will on occasion cover certain attitudes that are forming among the communities of both players and developers and how those attitudes are shaping the industry. We'll also talk about what a game's success or failure might mean to the current state of the industry and how mistakes of the past are being ignored or learned from. Along the way, there's a number of things that you will and will not see during this show. Importantly, the things that you will see include a steady focus on innovation and evolution within the MMO. We also plan to maintain a focus on how certain mechanics or features impact not only the game itself, but the communities that interact with that game. And probably most important that you need to know about the show is that it will contain almost exclusively editorial content. Even though I will mention news and announcements that are going on in the industry, every one of those will be brought up with the express purpose of nailing home an editorial opinion. As for things that you won't be seeing in this show, well, we won't be covering every feature and press release that comes across my desk. For all the games that I follow, that's just way too much. We'll also not make a habit of dwelling on the specific minutia of any specific feature or game mechanic or system within a game, unless doing so is necessary to show how it could potentially impact the industry on a whole. And the last thing that we will try not to do in this show is show any amount of favoritism towards a specific developer or game. Now, that last point actually leads me into my first topic because we're going to be talking about ArenaNet. And I won't BS you guys, I'm a huge fan. You're about to learn why you should be as well. There is a video floating around on the internet made by ArenaNet that they call their MMO Manifesto. And within this short video, they lay out the groundwork for why their next project, Guild Wars 2, is not only going to change the way that MMOs are played, but change the way that they are perceived. The president of ArenaNet, Mike O'Brien, has said in the past, ArenaNet was founded to innovate. Awesome. Now, as you already know, this show is going to be all about the innovations and evolutions of the MMO industry. So when a company comes out and says that that is their entire purpose in life, you can bet that I'm going to stand up and listen. And if you have a healthy interest in MMO gaming, you should too. Now, that being said, innovation itself is always a tricky subject because change for the sake of change can come back and bite you in the ass as a developer. We've seen numerous projects out there that have decided to try and change the entire paradigm of the MMO, and every single one of them has failed. The most famous example of this is probably Tabula Rasa. But there have been others, including Auto Assault, PlanetSide, Fallen Earth, and even to a certain extent Eve, which, although being a successful MMO now, was not well received at the time of its launch. There are two primary reasons for this. One is that many of those changes made by developers are sometimes not entirely thought through. The mechanics themselves might be in place, but they don't always think about how the players will react to those changes. I'm happy to announce that ArenaNet is putting a major focus on exactly what their players want and delivering it from there rather than just changing things because they think it needs to be changed. Now, the other reason that some of these innovations have sometimes fallen short and failed is simply because players like familiarity. This is why games like Rift, who a lot of people have compared to Warcraft on some of its many core mechanics, managed to have a good, strong release despite not offering players an entirely new experience. And even though there's a good portion of us out there that long for innovation, that long for evolution, the majority probably want familiarity and something they're comfortable with. This is why millions still play World of Warcraft. Now, aside from just the statement that ArenaNet intends to innovate with Guild Wars 2, why don't I get into the meat of some of the actual features that they are implementing into this game to drive home the evolution of the MMO. One of the most interesting and exciting features that I am looking forward to experiencing within this game is that from the moment of character creation, you are the hero. You have your own personal story that is driven by who you are and not what you are. It's not that you are an orc shaman. It's not that you are a shining paladin of your god of light. You are you. And you get to make choices about the stories that you are presented with and how the world revolves around you in a very real way. Each choice that you make within this game will branch off your personal story in different directions, which you then get to experience in a unique manner that no other player is guaranteed to ever experience. And while personal stories to some extent have already been used in the MMO, Age of Conan comes to mind, this branching objective system allows it to be a much more personalized experience to exactly what you feel like your character should be all about. Additionally, for players that love rolling up alts, this increases the replayability of this title to an unbelievable magnitude, since every single combination of race, class, wealth, social status, religion, a whole number of different things, and then you can make choices to change your personal experience from that point forward. No other MMO to date has given the players the freedom to create their own story and be their own hero. In fact, to a very real extent, most MMOs don't even care that you are there. The stories go on without you. I believe that because of this personal story that Guild Wars 2 and Star Wars The Old Republic are both implementing, the future of MMOs is going to be changed forever. Developers are going to have to find a way for every character to be a hero. Otherwise, players will go back to these games with the personal story. Who wants to be Grunt number 7000 when you can be Lord Aloysius of Greenwood? But the story doesn't stop there. You see, aside from your own personal story experience, the entire world of Guild Wars 2 is going to revolve around a system known as dynamic events. These have completely replaced the concept of static questing. In fact, Guild Wars 2 does not contain a single static quest. That means you will never be asked to go slay 10 wolves. You will never be asked to go collect 5 rare flowers. Instead, you will be a participant in ongoing plot-driven events, some of which are very localized, others which take place across an entire region of the world. Each of these is part of a chain which you as the player and your fellow players can have a very real impact on choosing how they turn out. And depending on your actions, those dynamic events may unfold in one direction or the other. Now, while there is a system to direct you to find these dynamic events, this will be one of the first MMOs where exploration becomes the goal of the game, rather than something that just happens as you're going along. Because each of these dynamic event chains has several different specific outcomes, it means that each different player progressing through a specific area may not always reach the same outcome, again enhancing the overall replayability options. Now, before I get too much further, I do want to editorialize a little bit on this because I am honestly worried that the lack of a shared uniform experience between different portions of the player base may actually end up having a negative impact on the community as a whole. Keep in mind sites like Wikipedia sites that thrive on giving the information to players based on a certain set amount of content, or Wowhead, which has a thriving online community built around giving each other the information about how to do certain things in a certain way. Every one of those people involved on either of those types of sites have experienced the game almost the same, and the only change is how they've dealt with the specific situation, but the specific situation itself has not changed. Now, I do worry that this lack of a uniform experience among the player base could potentially splinter the population, as they will no longer have something in common to talk about. As another metaphor, think about it this way. A lot of people read books, and they talk about books. But every one of those people that talks about that book has read the exact same book. If that book managed to change halfway for some of the readers, would they still all talk about it? And that actually leads me to my next point. There are a number of social innovations that ArenaNet is putting into Guild Wars 2 that I find incredibly fascinating. The most notable of these, in my personal opinion, is the automatic sidekicking system, which is driven not by grouping mechanics, but by the actual environment itself. Meaning that if the environment that these people are in is about a level 10 environment and a level 50 character comes along to play in that area, they will automatically become a level 10 character, sidekicked down by the environment so that they are now allowed to grief or kill steal or invade somebody else's event and screw up the scaling or anything of that nature. This also allows those same high-level characters to seamlessly interact with their low-level buddies and to potentially experience new content that they had already out-leveled without having an adverse impact on those people that are experiencing that content at the appropriate level. Now, also from a grouping point of view, the whole concept of the golden triad of classes is also being thrown out the window for Guild Wars 2. Thank God Almighty, we are done with that. Hopefully this is a trend that catches on in the MMO industry as a whole, and we can move on from this point. According to ArenaNet, every single class within their game has the ability to tank, heal, DPS, control, what have you. This means it no longer is a case of you play with who you have to play with, but rather you play with who you want to play with. Now, I will admit to having a little hesitation on that because I have a feeling that certain classes will still perform better in a certain role. And as we all know, communities within the MMO industry are apt to say, well, you perform that role better, so that's your role. Don't do anything else except that. I won't count my chickens too soon, though. We'll see if ArenaNet can pull this off. And the last social innovation that I think is something that just every game needs to include from this point forward is ArenaNet is actively developing a suite of mobile apps, which will enable things like chatting with your friends in-game from your iPad or iPhone, or being able to look up a Wikipedia and then send those links directly to your friends within the game system. In the world in which we live, where everybody is so hyper-connected, not having some form of outside-the-game interaction feels like a major oversight. And the fact that ArenaNet is already on board with developing these mobile applications speaks well for their foresight of the industry as a whole. And last but certainly not least, ArenaNet has shown us a number of details about their innovative combat system, which is an active combat system, something still relatively in its infancy in the MMO industry. We have seen a few other games attempt active combat systems. Guild Wars 2 is trying their own. I don't want to go too much into detail on this because it is currently still in an early beta process and much of this could change, but I do want to point out a few things that I just find fascinating. One of which is that at this time there is a fatigue system that drives not only your cooldowns, but also your movement and your ability to dodge. On the surface, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but think about this. If you end up spamming your cooldowns as quickly as you can, you will use up all of your fatigue and be unable to dodge. This becomes a self-policing process where if you spam your abilities, you're more likely to take more damage because you're unable to outflank your opponent and dodge their incoming attacks, meaning that it becomes a self-defeating tactic. Now, aside from that fatigue system, ArenaNet is also attempting to include things like environmental effects, where if you fire an arrow through a wall of fire, that arrow will catch on fire. Not only that, but if that arrow hits something between itself and its target, there is actual collision detection on a per projectile basis. That also means, yes, you can dodge arrows. Now, I don't know about you, but some of the stuff that I've just mentioned as being present in this game excites the hell out of me. And to be honest, if ArenaNet can deliver half of these things, half as well as they plan to, this is still going to be a landmark within the MMO industry. Keep an eye on it, because it's worth watching. Now, earlier when I was talking about evolving personal storylines, I did mention that these will also be present in Star Wars: The Old Republic. This highly anticipated title from BioWare also has a number of incredible other innovations that are worth knowing about because they will likely have a larger impact on MMOs in the future. In fact, the concept of an evolving storyline is a cornerstone. It is such a core feature of this upcoming game that they have actually given it its own moniker, calling it the fourth pillar of online gaming. The other three being progression, exploration, and combat, which they say these other three have already been effectively executed in MMOs prior to this point. But story has never been given the attention that it deserves, and BioWare plans to change that. Every single class within the Old Republic will have its very own storyline, each of which will evolve in unique ways based on the choices made by the players within their archetypes. And while that on the surface sounds very similar to what Guild Wars 2 is intending to accomplish, keep in mind that BioWare has also gone on record as saying that each one of these individual stories contains as much content as an entire previous BioWare title. That amount of content, honestly, kind of makes my brain melt, but it does have a downside. You see, when you're playing a single-player game and you're confronted with a major choice, a life-altering decision to be made, and you don't like the outcome, you can always save your game right before that and just reload. You can't do that in an MMO. Once you make a choice, you're stuck with it for better or worse, and you can never go back and change your mind. Now, in previous MMOs, you were stuck with these choices in the form of class choices or specific abilities that you chose to learn, most of which could be unlearned. But when you're talking about a story, you can't go back in time, at least not in Star Wars. Yet. Now, hopefully some of those choices that you're presented with will be a little easier to manage because you will not be alone. I'm not talking about your fellow players, I'm still talking about your single-player personal storyline. But accompanying you on this is a class of character known as companion characters. If you've played a BioWare title in the past, you know who I'm talking about. They're your party members, those chatty folks that follow you around and do your bidding, even if they hate you. BioWare claims that companion characters have always been an intrinsic part of the Star Wars universe, citing character examples like Chewbacca and R2-D2. I can buy that to a certain extent, but really this just sounds like a BioWare mechanic shoehorned into an MMO. We'll see how it turns out, but I have my doubts as to how seamless it will feel to incorporate such a characteristically single-player aspect of a game into an MMO. But companions will have their uses. Aside from just following you around and adding to your firepower, they'll also help you out by being a personal conscience of a type. Also, each of these will have their own type of content to explore, and the choices that you make during their content can also impact those companion characters in a very real way. For example, you can choose to help and aid and support them, or you can choose to manipulate them and corrupt them. The choice is up to you. However, it has been said that if you go too far down certain paths with certain companions, they may even turn on you. With friends like that, who needs enemies, right? Now, there are other uses for your companions, including that they are a core component of the crafting system that will be present in Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is neat, because that means that your crew members on board your ship are actually the ones doing your bidding for you while you go out and be this famous adventurer. After all, Indiana Jones wasn't seen making potions, and Han Solo usually had Chewbacca fix the Millennium Falcon for him. Probably the single most anticipated feature of Star Wars: The Old Republic is the vast amount of voiceover acting that has been added to every single aspect of this game. Now, I'm not just talking about important NPCs or important portions of the story. No, every single character that you interact with within Star Wars: The Old Republic, from the lowest of the low peons to the highest and most important NPCs you could ever possibly meet, will be voiced. That includes yourself as well. The total amount of voice acting included within this title is said to outstrip every single prior BioWare title ever created, combined. Now, I'll be quite honest with you, this level of voice acting just simply cannot happen anywhere else other than the MMO genre. We've seen it in some PC games to date, such as Dragon Age 2. However, an important distinction is that Dragon Age 2, because they also wanted to make a console game, sacrificed their environment art in order to include so many hours of voiceovers. While within the MMO industry, developers don't have to necessarily make those sacrifices because not only can the content be included in patches, but it is also typically so modular that rearranging some of the environment art assets can create an entirely new playground for you to play on. Now, since this type of feature can only really effectively take place within an MMO, it's my personal opinion that this is where MMOs need to go. All AAA class MMOs in the future need to include vast amounts of voice acting. If it is a single standout feature that can only be effectively accomplished within this industry, then every MMO should embrace that as a part of an identity of the genre in years to come. But you don't have to take my word for it. You see, Star Wars is already catching the eye of other prominent developers. In fact, recently the CEO of Blizzard, Mike Morhaime, was quoted as saying that a successful high-budget MMO under the IP of Star Wars can only mean good things for the industry as a whole by bringing in more players and increasing the overall population of gamers that enjoy that type of game. Now, granted, I don't think he would have been saying the same thing if the IP was more of a fantasy genre, since that would have brought it directly into competition with his meal ticket. But it's nice to see some industry acknowledgement, and I believe that the BioWare guys are on the right track to deserving that recognition. Now, hopefully that's been able to bring you up to speed on these two very important projects within the MMO industry. And as I've said before, these are not the only games out there, folks. I just wanted to give you a groundwork to build from as we continue to discuss these. As I said earlier, if these two games deliver on even half of what they're promising, they will be landmarks within the MMO industry and are likely to become recurring topics, especially as we draw closer to their beta and release phases. And that about does it for this episode of The Morgue. Join me for the next episode where I'll be taking a good look at APB's relaunch as a free-to-play title, as well as doing a bit of a post-mortem on Rift now that it's been 2 full months since their release back in March. Until then, my name is Jeremy and this has been The Morgue. Play smart, everybody.